There are many genres in the video game industry. Today we will be focusing on one in particular, adventure games. Some critics are assholes and claim that adventure games have the same plot. For example, in The Legend of Zelda, you are almost always a young adventurer who is tasked with rescuing the realm of Hyrule from certain demise at the hands of the evil Ganon. However, this does not invalidate or subtract from the stories that these games have to tell. The reason is that any story that involves an adventure can be boiled down to its core components, also known as the hero's journey. Popularized in Joseph Campbell's 1949 work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, Campbell poses that all stories that include an adventure, be it myths, literature, television, or even video games, all follow the same patterns. Today we'll be looking at the adventures had in several video games and breaking them down into 3 parts: the departure, the initiation, and the return. Every adventure story begins with a call to adventure, a term used to describe what situation the adventurer finds themselves in before the adventure. In The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, Link, aka the player character, finds themselves just having a normal Saturday morning, sleeping in late as per usual. Link gets a literal wake-up call from Navi to go see the Great Deku Tree and help him. It is important to remember that the call to adventure is a choice made by the hero. Sometimes this call to adventure is refused by the would-be hero. If Link just decides to sit on his ass and not go see the Great Deku Tree and hang out in his dope-ass treehouse, then there is no adventure. If this happens, then it's a bad end. No hero, no story. It's as simple as that. Link continues to live his normal life among the Kokiri while Ganondorf takes over the fucking world. But once Link does go ahead and help the Great Deku Tree, he is given supernatural aid in the form of items that will allow him to overcome the adversities in his adventures. He is even given an ocarina, which gives him supernatural powers through music. It is at this moment in Ocarina of Time that Link crosses the first threshold. The young, fairyless boy from the forest finally leaves into Greater Hyrule for the first time. It was the dying wish of the Great Deku Tree for him to visit Princess Zelda and aid her in any way possible. At any moment, Link can give up, go home, and live the rest of his life, but he is motivated. Motivated by fear. Fear that all of Hyrule will eventually burn and succumb to the whims of Ganondorf. It is this fear that drives him to press on in his adventure. After visiting with Zelda, Link is tasked with finding the other 2 spiritual stones to allow him access to the Temple of Time. Searching for these 2 items is when he is invited into the belly of the whale. Literally. There are unknown dangers that lie ahead that could easily end an unexpected adventure, but Link is able to endure nonetheless. Taking a step away from one of the most iconic adventure series, let's look at another example of the departure in one of my favorite adventure games, Luigi's Mansion. The first part, or departure, of Luigi's journey can be summed up as: Luigi's brother Mario has disappeared when they went to go meet up at Luigi's newly won mansion. Luigi goes into the mansion and is promptly attacked by fucking ghosts. Facing almost certain demise, Luigi is saved by Professor Egad and given a motherfucking vacuum cleaner to get rid of the ghosts in the house and eventually find Mario. God, this game is fucking weird. This ends the departure and leads us into the second stage of the adventure. For this section, we will be analyzing BioShock Infinite. While the ending may not follow the conventional hero's journey structure, BioShock follows the departure and the initiation perfectly. However, instead of looking at the game through the lens of Booker, we'll be looking at Elizabeth's story. Elizabeth was held up in a tower by a man named Comstock, unable to leave until Booker comes along to take her out on her journey. Part 1 complete. The first part of the initiation stage is the Road of Trials. Elizabeth starts this by helping Booker acquire the firepower needed to allow them to both escape from Columbia. The next step is shown during the temporal ghost shit that happens with Lady Comstock, also known as the meeting with the goddess. This can be described as an understanding of truth. Elizabeth comes to terms with the fact that she is not responsible for the misery of Lady Comstock, and finally learns the truth. After this realization, the next step is the woman as temptress. The woman temptress in BioShock Infinite is less of a physical temptation from a woman and more of Elizabeth being tempted to just let Comstock take over the future. So to stop Comstock from becoming alpha version Hitler, she does some time travel, other dimensional shit to allow Booker to keep Comstock from rising to power. The next few steps can be put in pretty much any order depending on the story. First is the apotheosis, which can be conquering of an enemy or acquisition of supernatural powers. In Elizabeth's case, it's opening up portals to other dimensions. Next up is the atonement with the father. For Elizabeth, this means it's with her actual father, who is, spoiler alert, Booker and fucking Comstock, because they're the same person from different dimensions or some shit. She realizes that the only way to keep Comstock from rising to power is to kill Booker, which is Elizabeth's ultimate boon. This can be something that the hero shares with the world, and in BioShock, it is Elizabeth's ending of her own fucking father to save mankind from Comstock. An example of the initiation can be seen quickly in Donkey Kong Country. DK and Diddy have to go through a bunch of levels getting help from DK's grandpa and eventually kill a fucking crocodile, and the ultimate boon is bananas. Literally. A gazillion of them. The last part of the hero's journey is the return. In Donkey Kong's case, it's super simple. He just goes home and has the freedom to live, stuffing his fat ass with as many bananas as possible. Not really a good representation of the return. All of the steps in the return are not necessary to have in a story, but at least one must be present. Therefore, I'll be doing this part in more of a list form, which can be rearranged into whatever fits the narrative you want to create. The weird step, which ends the return promptly, is the simple refusal to return, just like the refusal of the call. If this is chosen, then proceed back to the beginning of the video to see what happens. This is demonstrated in Red Dead Redemption after John Marston is killed. Jack Marston, his son, is like, "Fuck you guys, you killed my dad," and sets out on another journey to avenge his father, even after the game has technically ended. The next steps can be done in any order and in any quantity. The first is the magical flight. Sometimes the hero has to escape somehow after they achieve their goal and receive their boon. In Samus's case, in the Metroid series, she has to get out of the facility after killing a giant fucking brain before the self-destruct timer goes off and she is killed. The second is the rescue from without. Usually this entails the hero getting assistance from a friend or a guide, especially if the hero happens to be wounded or weakened. This can be seen in Breath of the Wild, where if Link chooses to help the Guardians, they use their divine beasts to help weaken Ganon. The third is crossing the return threshold. This step is a culmination of all the wisdom the heroes gain during the journey, and figuring out how to use this wisdom for later to share it with the world. In two of my favorite games of all time, Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, Banjo and Kazooie return home with their sister, Tootie, who is kidnapped by Gruntilda the Witch in the first game. They go home and have a happily ever after, for a little while. Grunty eventually comes back in the sequel, and the player is able to use every single one of the moves that were available in the first fucking game. And then, they get to learn more in their new adventure. More games should do this. Holy shit. The fourth step is becoming the master of two worlds. This is where the hero is able to be comfortable and competent in both inner and outer worlds, meaning the hero has been able to overcome adversity and become a master and is now currently back in a state of rest. Pokemon Trainer Red from Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal perfectly exemplifies this. He mastered the world of Pokemon and became the champion. To quote Campbell, his personal ambitions being totally dissolved, he no longer tries to live, but willingly relaxes to whatever may come to pass in him. He becomes, that is to say, an anonymity. After beating the Pokemon League and becoming champion, Red literally isolates himself on the biggest fucking rock he could find with the most powerful Pokemon in the region, just getting stronger and stronger, until a young adventurer on their own journey comes to battle Red. The fifth and final step is the freedom to live. This means that the hero is free from the burden of negative emotions and is able to live in the moment. Emotions such as fear, sadness, doubt, and despair. Instead, the hero is able to celebrate in the moment and ascend to bliss. A game that demonstrates this perfectly is The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. During the game, the inhabitants of Termina are filled with so many negative emotions due to the fact that the goddamn moon is going to crash into the world and kill everyone in only 3 days. The inhabitants are unable to do anything to save themselves, so some of them sit in fear, sadness, and some are even able to accept their fate, willingly or in ignorant bliss. Once Link stops the moon from falling and saves Termina, the people celebrate and are happy once again to live their lives worry-free. And that's the whole hero's journey, described through video games. Pretty much any adventure game, or story for that matter, can be lined up to these steps. Try it out next time you're watching a movie or playing a game. See if you can recognize any of these plot points in it. I know this is probably getting a little long at this point, but I'd like to add one more bit. This also applies to the story of your life. Be it getting through school, or trying to get a job, or even with the relationships you have with people. Even just surviving from your day-to-day, this applies. These steps can be seen in life, which is why they echoed throughout time and continue to exist to this day. If you're unhappy with your current story, try to seek an adventure. You'll never know what your call will be. Until next time, peace!